Every city tells a story. Its buildings, its people, all encode what went before. Johor Bahru is the capital city of the state of Johor, situated at the bottom of Peninsular Malaysia. It developed from a collection of gambia and pepper plantations, as is celebrated in the design of the street lamps. In Johor Bahru, you can still see signs of the old kampong lifestyle alongside of modernity, and the occasional splash of regal splendour. So let's explore the extraordinary hidden history of Johor Bahru. Back in the early 19th century, this is all it was. Hardly anybody lived on the land. The Malays were sea people who raided and traded the local coastal areas. John Crawford, governor of Singapore in 1824, said, "Johor is one dreary forest without human habitation or the marks of there having been any." Well, since then, there's been a lot of changes in Johor and Singapore. This is the statue of Sir Stamford Raffles, who in 1819 landed here and founded the city of Singapore. It's also the beginnings of our story about the founding of Johor Bahru. In 1819, when Sir Stamford Raffles landed here, the place was run by the Johor Sultanate, who controlled the various islands around the region. The place was populated by a few Chinese planters and the Orang Laut. These were Malay sea traders. They were great rivals to the East India Company. Naturally, the East India Company wanted in on that action, and they also did a bit of raiding on the side, so the East India Company considered them to be abject pirates. Well, the Temenggung Abdul Rahman, well, he fancied living here in Teluk Blana, which, as you can see, is a pretty decent place to live in. And so, taking advantage of a succession dispute amongst the Johor royal family, he offered the British a trade deal. So long as they backed his man, Sultan Hussein. And so Sultan Hussein sets up shop in Kampong Glam, which was a nice little trading zone, and the Temenggung Abdul Rahman, well, he's offered this nice place in Teluk Blana, and there he can oversee his piratical pals and the island over there. Temenggung Abdul Rahman and Sultan Hussein saw themselves as the rulers of Singapore, with the addition of a British pension. What could be better than that? But of course, things didn't go quite to plan. Johor became split in two. The entire royal family just no longer got on with each other. In fact, the old royal family is buried over in Bukit Kasita, which is way over on the other side of the bay. And Sultan Hussein's family are buried here in Jalan Kubur. But of course, Sultan Hussein himself is buried way over in Malacca, which perhaps indicates that the entire family just did not get on with each other after they'd done that deal with that Raffles chap. Another indication that things didn't quite go to plan is that this is the Masjid Temenggung Ding Ibrahim and not the Masjid Sultan Hussein. Sultan Hussein could see his power slipping away from him, and he slunk off to his lands in Muar, which is near Malacca, and left Abdul Rahman, who is Deng Ibrahim's father, to his more piratical business plan of harassing anybody trying to trade with the British without his permission. This is Keppel Bay. The reason why it's named Keppel is because it was named after Admiral Keppel, the man who did the most to defeat all the pirates in this region. And you can see why this is Keppel Bay. Over here, this island here, this was a notorious pirate lair. It threatened the entire trade of the South China Seas. And over here was Temenggung Abdul Rahman's kampong. Temenggung Abdul Rahman, pirates. And here was a narrow passageway outside of which the British started parking their ships, and then they blew it up and developed this area as a deep water base for their navy. Dame Ibrahim, who, by the way, is buried with Abdul Rahman in a rather splendid mausoleum beside the Masjid Dame Ibrahim. Well, he could see that his father's business plan was somewhat flawed, and so he ratted out his piratical partners to the British in exchange for them supporting his claim upon land in mainland Malaysia. With that sort of land, he needed to find some tenants he could rent it out to who might maximise his profits. So I thought, who might that be? And as you can see, we're in, well, the rather extraordinary Chinatown area of Singapore. A Chu Chow society called the Nihen Kungsi had been cultivating pepper and gambia in the centre of Singapore since before the British turned up. They were a bunch of political rebels. They supported the Ming and definitely opposed the Qing. And you had to swear a blood oath to your elected leaders and promise to fight for righteousness. In fact, they were a bit of a rough lot. In 1823, the British decided that they had to pay a licence fee for land that they considered to be their own. Well, as you can well imagine, that did not sit well, and they refused to pay. This is Sear Street. It's named after Sir Yu Chin, and he was new in town. He set up an organisation called the Nihen Kungsi, and you can't help feeling that he was just trying to confuse the British. However, the Nihen Kungsi didn't require its members to take blood oaths. It just was an association of businessmen who were looking for a decent return on their investments. So in other words, they were the sort of men that the British could do business with. And as you can see, the Nihen Kungsi did very well for themselves. But the Nihen Kungsi were outgunned by the British, and so had to put in operation Plan B. Dame Ibrahim, no doubt sympathising with their plight, offered them a plot of land over here in Johor. And so, led by their enforcer Tan Ki Sun, 4,000 of them left Singapore and came here to brave the crocodiles and tigers of the Tebrau River in Johor. And it was here at Kankar Tebrau, or the foot of the river, as it is, where they planned revenge. And almost forgotten, Tan Ki Sun's ancestral tablets are on display in the temple here. I say almost forgotten, because people still come here to pay their respects. The man himself, or at least his ancestral tablet. Back in 1851, the Kungsi had its revenge. They launched a raid on Singapore that killed 500 traitors, as they saw them, and destroyed 28 plantations. The British were not too pleased about that and swore that they would destroy them. But with the death of Tan Kee Soon, things were about to change. Now, this rather alarming building was built in 1939 by the British on exactly the same spot that Nihen Ibrahim in 1855 stuck up his flagpole and declared that he ruled the place and not the Chinese. From this hill you can see down here onto Tanjung Puteri. Tanjung Puteri, that means Prince's Cove. He immediately renamed it Tanjung Iskandar, the Cove of Alexander. Alexander the Great. For some reason, the Malaysian royalty thought of themselves as descendants of the great adventurer Alexander the Great, which probably indicates that he had very high hopes. However, all he had in those days was a flagpole and a little customs office. But he did have a son, and his son Abu Bakar was a very different kettle of fish. I am Nihen Ibrahim's son, Abu Bakar. I received a very expensive English education and forged ties with a new breed of urban Chinese businessmen who worked closely with the British. Tan Hock Ni started off as an indentured labourer in Singapore, but worked his way up to become a local textiles trader. He was still a very young man, and like a lot of young men, he took the opportunity to come to the frontier and set up business. And in fact, this was the start of urban development in Johor Bahru. Civilization indeed. When I was only 26, Abu Bakar gave me a license to become a Kantu, giving me the right to cultivate the left side of the Segit River. The younger generation were taken over from the old triad enforcer, and in 1864, Tan Hock Ni was made Capitan China by Abu Bakar, with the brief that he had to transform the old Nihen Kungsi into a business association along the lines of the Nihen Kungsi in Singapore. Not only did Tan Hock Ni copy the Nihen Kungsi, he also allied with them, forming the Great Opium Syndicate. Abu Bakar, who was a bit of a charmer, was not only friendly with the Tu Chao Chinese, but also with the Cantonese. And so he opened up the right side of the Segit River to the Cantonese. This is Wong Ah Fuk Street. Wong Ah Fuk was a builder, a building contractor that was brought in by Abu Bakar to build his palace. Wong Ah Fuk was also only in his 20s when he was made a Kanchu. The guys who built this town were mere youngsters. In fact, they even started their lives pretty low down the pecking order as merely coolies. The majority of the Chinese, though, didn't have their luck. One gets the impression that the Cantonese weren't as tame as the Chu Chow of Tan Hock Ni's side of the river. They came down here for the Iraq and the gambling and the opium and the brothels, whereas on the other side of the river you merely went for your groceries and your laundry. And when the causeway between Johor and Singapore was opened in 1920s, you can see why they had to build this police station right next door to Kampong Wong Ah Fuk. Singapore had once had the reputation of being a rip-roaring town full of pirates, whores and adventurers out for a fast buck. Well, the frontier had now moved. This prison was built by Wong Ah Fuk. And it was apparently a bit of a hellhole. It was one of the sticks that the British would beat the Sultan with in order to help them impose British rule. It was imperative that order be kept in order to maintain independence from the ever-opportunistic British. So to avoid the sort of conflicts between all the Chinese clans and associations that had been plaguing Malaysia and Singapore at this time, this temple was built. Abu Bakar banned all Chinese associations other than the Nihen Kungsi, on the condition that they included the Hainanese, the Hakka and the Cantonese and the Hokkien alongside the Chu Chow. And the assumption was that all disputes would be settled within the walls of this temple. And in celebration of the unification of all the Chinese, in Johor, we have the Chingay Festival, where over 5 days, each deity of the 5 Chinese clans are paraded through the streets in cacophonous celebration. Sultan Hussein's son Ali died in Malacca. And as was common amongst Malay royal folk, there was a succession dispute. They were only fighting over a little strip of land on the west coast called Muar. There was a population of about 80 people. So with a bit of strong arming from his old pals the Nihen Kungsi, Abu Bakar managed to get the sons to withdraw their claims and pave the way for his annexation of the territory. And in 1886, son of Dame Ibrahim, grandson of Temangong Abdul Rahman, with a little bit of help from his best friend forever, Queen Victoria, I told you was a bit of a charmer, the British recognised him as Sultan of Johor. His father's business plan definitely worked. It worked very well indeed. This palace says who's boss. With the Sultanate firmly established, we see the beginnings of a state with all the fixings. We've got post office, we've got a Ministry of Transport, we've got a Ministry of Health and a High Court. In fact, we've got everything. We've even got the rule of law. And to celebrate the new state, he renamed Tanjung Iskandar Johor Bahru. In other words, New Johor. One of the conditions for recognising Abu Bakar as a sultan was that he should accept a British resident. But of course, with a bit of shrewd manoeuvring, he managed to avoid that. Even so, there was the Gambia and pepper gave way to rubber plantations, even under the increasing British influence, and along with it came the plantation workers and the Indian administrators, adding a new layer to the city. 15 years after Sultan Abu Bakar's death in 1910, Sultan Ibrahim, his son, was worn down by the British and finally had to accept a British resident. The British finally had their revenge on the Nihen Kungsi. In 1914, they abolished it. The Nihen didn't fight, though. Instead, they donated all their assets to the new school in return for an act of worship in remembrance of their role in the shaping of Johor Bahru. Here at what is known locally as the Ming Tomb, they've buried all the Nihen Kungsi ceremonial paraphernalia and records. There are no bodies buried in this tomb, but there might be details of where some of the bodies are buried. The story of Johor Bahru isn't finished yet, because here we have the new city of Iskandar being built right next door. And as usual, we find the Chinese are at the heart of the building boom. The story of Johor Bahru is written in its streets. It is a story of pirates turning into princes, of indentured coolies turning into wealthy businessmen, of warring triads turning into charitable institutions. It is a story that never ends.